Well, let's run through Saturday. Now, I will preface this by saying I was at the Notre Dame Pitt game. So I was able to watch a decent amount of football outside of that, but not as much as I would normally watch. So we'll just kind of run through this. We'll talk about what's interesting, what was exciting, and share our thoughts. Let's just start. Penn State beats Indiana 33-24. I I didn't see that coming. Are we concerned about Penn State, Ashton, more than we were?
I mean, I am. As someone who has been betting a lot on Penn State, I'm concerned. Indiana, by the way, had the ball late in the fourth quarter with a chance not just to tie, they ended up tying, but they could have taken the lead. They were only down 3, and they ended up kind of settling for a field goal, kind of wimping out a little bit, is what it felt like, and allowing Penn State back in this. Penn State's offense is not very good. I mean, there's you can cut these things a lot of different ways, but the truth of the matter is that Indiana is not a fantastic team. They're really not. They're 0-5 in Big Ten play. They're one of the worst teams in the Power Five, you could argue.
Yep.
And they had a real chance to beat Penn State. They had a real chance. That offense was not very good. As someone who has bet a lot on Penn State this year, and honestly, they've kind of been okay early in the year. They have definitely regressed. It feels like going, and maybe, I don't know, is that even fair to say? Because it could have been some of just the hangover from the Ohio State game too. Does that make sense at all?
That's a huge part of it, I think, and that's why I would say I'll reserve final judgment on them until I see how they play against Michigan. But yeah, I definitely view them as a clear underdog in that game.
Yes,
even without certain people on the sideline for Michigan. All right, moving on.
No, real quick, we have to stop. Hang on. We haven't talked about it very much.
You're right.
We've let it go because the whole Michigan thing is, I just view it as very funny. I think it's funny, and mainly the only reason it's really funny is because Michigan and maybe parts of the Big Ten, but Michigan in particular does view themselves just a little higher than the rest, just a little bit more noble than some of the other college football programs. And it's funny from that thing. Jim Harbaugh is being treated a little unfairly here, in my opinion. I don't think many coaches have issues with it. I think a few of them do, but I think most coaches don't have issues with it because they're also doing the same thing. That's kind of where I come out on it. Was it wrong? Yeah. Was it wrong? You think it was wrong?
I would zag on that a little bit. I think everyone is trying to steal signals. I don't think everyone is hiring people to go record. It's the same as, I mean, okay, it reminds everyone of the Astros thing. And I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing, but everyone in baseball steals signals. The Astros were the ones using technology to do it. Correct. And this is the same thing. You cannot be still angry at the Astros 6 years later and also in the same breath say this Michigan thing is no big deal. And I'm not calling you out. I don't know your stance on the Astros. I'm just saying that I've seen a lot of that out there where people still hate the Astros, and I understand why. And then in the same breath, they're basically saying that this Michigan thing is no big deal. Yes, everyone steals signals, but it sounds like Michigan was, even most of those coaches that will do like anonymous, whatever, share their thoughts. Even they will say, yeah, everyone's doing it, but they went a little extra. Like they took it extra. They took it further than you're supposed to, for sure.
They were very blatant with it. Like that should not have been okay. Do you know how ridiculously easy it is to steal signs?
Yeah.
Like what I don't understand is how you got caught. Like that was kind of where I come from. If I was a college football coach, I would put a dude with photographic memory up in the booth with binoculars and a notepad. Like that's literally all you really need to steal signs. It's not that hard. And yeah, to have him out there, like, by the way, he's an employee of the university and he's like, there's a paper trail. Like he's Venmoing people money how hard is it just to go scalp a ticket? Like just go pay cash at the gate for a ticket. And like it's cash, there's no trail. It seems wildly easy to get away with this, and somehow Michigan got caught, which to me is funny. Whether or not what becomes of it, I really don't know, and I don't feel like I don't have a strong opinion yet on what will actually become of it. I don't think much will happen this year. I really don't. So I think it'll just kind of be what it is. And yeah, I just think it's funny. The glass houses were that just was made me very happy just to see that happen to them.
Yeah, and don't misunderstand me. I'm not like it is a big deal, and it's definitely against the rules. I also don't think it gives some massive advantage. Like it gives some advantage, otherwise they wouldn't do it. But it's not like we're gonna all of a sudden see Michigan lose to Ohio State by 3 touchdowns. Maybe they do, but I would be shocked. Like I still view Michigan as a legit top 3 team in the country, and I don't think this really changes my view of them going forward a whole lot from a quality of team standpoint. And I also don't think we're going to see any serious punishments handed out this year. Like Michigan, if they went out, they're going to the playoff. Like the College Football Playoff Committee, they're not just dropping them out of the playoff. Like
Correct.
The Big Ten, the Big Ten could keep Michigan out of the Big Ten championship game. They're still going to the playoff. Whatever. Like Michigan still has everything in front of them.
They wouldn't.
I don't think. I'm just
They're
like saying, like at the very worst, that could maybe be a thing that happens, and even that is a stretch. And even if that happens, Michigan's still going to the playoff if they win out. So, it doesn't really change that much about the season. But I'm with you. It's just kind of funny.
They asked Kirby Smart about it the other day, and I watch Kirby's pressers pretty frequently. And so Michigan had scouted the SEC championship game against Georgia when Alabama played Georgia, and then Georgia, of course, the very next game played Michigan in the playoff. They asked Kirby about that. How do you feel? And he's like, we didn't really think much about it. Like we didn't notice we noticed nothing different, which honestly that's probably more true than most programs. Most people would lead to believe. I mean, you can know what's going to happen, but it's a whole nother thing to stop it. And I think I don't think Michigan is going to slow down any now that they're not stealing signals for the rest of the year. You know what I'm saying? I don't think the point spread will be affected much.
Yep. Okay. Florida State beat Wake Forest 41-16. Feels like Florida State maybe has finally figured out how to win again. Like they had a little bit of a rough stretch where they were just winning close, but you'd rather win close than lose. And another top 10 team did lose on Saturday. Oklahoma loses to Kansas 38-33. And this is, by the way, Jalen Daniels, who we weren't sure if he was going to play or not. He did not play. So Jason Bean was the quarterback for Kansas. And he has a history of putting up decent numbers and also turnovers at the same time. And by the way, that's what happened in this game. 2 interceptions for him, and they still beat Oklahoma. What do you think, Ashton? Like, what are your thoughts about this Oklahoma team? Do they just blow the best chance they've had in a long time?
Well, they did that. That's for sure. They have an uphill climb. Now they will get another shot at Texas if they win out, which is not a certainty anymore. But if they do, they will get another shot at Texas and a chance to improve their resume again, right? But Kansas is a sneaky good football team. So like, I don't view it as a devastating loss. Like this is not, this isn't the Kansas team that we've seen in years past, right? Lance Leipold has done a really good job there. They're 6-2. Kansas is a good football team. And they beat Oklahoma. Like they led for large chunks of this game. It wasn't fluky. They won the time of possession. They were better on 3rd downs. They were better on 4th downs, and they had more overall yardage. Like they had more first downs too. So they were the better football team. They had less penalties. To the Oklahoma side of it, I mean, this is 2 weeks in a row now. Like they should have lost against UCF last week. And they could be 6-2 easily right now. They're 7-1. I don't know. Is there a chance they're just looking ahead to that Oklahoma game, or it's just sleepwalking through it, or maybe they're just not as good. Maybe they had one really, really good game in them, that game against Texas, and that was just kind of a one-off. I'm leaning that way. I think Oklahoma is maybe a top 10 team, but closer to 10 than they are to 5, maybe, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I would say that they're not quite as physically talented as a team like Texas.
No,
they can beat Texas, and obviously they did. The difference between Texas and Kansas was apparent on the field. Like you could just see the difference between the teams physically. Oklahoma and Kansas obviously Oklahoma's more talented than Kansas, but it wasn't as stark of a difference. And Oklahoma has to get closer to reaching their potential to beat teams like Texas than vice versa, if that makes sense. And they still have every chance to win the Big 12. It's all in front of them, but they might need a little bit of help now to make the playoff. Like, we do have a chance of having undefeated teams ahead of them for all the playoff spots.
And just a little bit to that as well. Like, they're going to be favored in their remaining 4 games.
Right.
Like, they're going to be favored in probably by at least a touchdown. They have at Oklahoma State, which is probably like about a touchdown right now, and then West Virginia, BYU, TCU. And they're going to be favored by at least 1 score in all of those games. So, yeah, they have every chance to still get back there. However, in this year, with a lot of undefeated teams still, like we're already in week 9. There's a lot of undefeated teams still out there. Yeah, you'd rather be, I mean, every undefeated champion is going to get ahead in the playoff ahead of a 1-loss champion. Like, that's just all there is to it.
By the way, if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm hoping that we got people contacting Lance Leipold, Andy Kotelnicki, and Jalen Daniels.
Yeah. Oh, you want them all.
Just all of them.
Just, hey.
Andy Kotelnicki is a great offensive coordinator. He's been with Leipold for a while. And if Leipold stays there, I don't know if he'll be able to hold on to Kotelnicki another year.
Really?
Someone's gonna offer that dude a bag, because what Kansas does in offense is really special. So
what about Indiana? Who are you guys gonna get for a new coach?
Oh, man, I don't know if Indiana has enough money to get rid of Tom Allen yet.
Oh, really?
He might need one more year. I'm not sure.
Sore topic. Sorry.
Oh, that's rough. Anyway, moving on. Texas A&M beats South Carolina 30-17. I did not get much of this at all. Did you watch this game, Ashton?
Yeah, bits and pieces. It's a game. Both coaches had to have this one, right? Jimbo Fisher can't recover from a loss to South Carolina there. There is real concern right now in the South Carolina program about Shane Beamer. I mean, I know it's just 1 year, and you can say that that's a little unfair, but look what's happening around you. Like look what's happening all over the SEC and really just all over college football. You can't get left behind. And there's a feeling of desperation there for South Carolina. Maybe a little unfair. It might be a little unfair because, I mean, the schedule is the way that it is for them, and they happen to play, they just happen to be in the same division as, the best program going right now, which is Georgia. I mean, it hurts, right? And Tennessee is also on the come up. South Carolina has real issues, though. Like, they're not going bowling. I hate to say that he's going to be gone, but after seeing the last couple of weeks and that loss to Florida in particular, I think he's probably going to be gone. I think Shane Beamer is probably on his last year there.
I don't think so. I think he has one more year, and if the offensive line is as bad next year as it is this year, then he'll definitely be gone. So he's got, in my opinion, he's got a year to figure out how to block somebody. So we'll see. Moving on down through the afternoon. NC State beats Clemson 24-17. Speaking of South Carolina programs struggling, Clemson now 4-4. I'm a little bit at a loss for words with this team. I know Clemson is down. They should not lose to NC State, in my opinion. At least not this NC State team, because NC State this year is not as good as they have been in years past, and yet somehow Clemson still finds a way to lose.
Clemson's 4-4 right now. The remaining 4 games, they have 4 games left. They are a home game against Notre Dame, home game against Georgia Tech, home game against North Carolina, and then at South Carolina. So Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, South Carolina. Georgia Tech's actually sneaky good. I don't know if we've noticed this. Georgia Tech's winning some football games there. South Carolina's going to be desperate, to end the year against those guys. They're doing good if they go 2-2. I legit think 1-3 is more likely than 3-1. I don't know if this team goes bowling. That's where I'm at. I don't know if this team goes bowling. It's been very disappointing. I had Clemson in my playoff in the preseason. I thought they were that good. I thought bringing in Garrett Riley was going to make Cade Klubnik into kind of what we saw with Max Duggan, maybe a little bit. He was going to revolutionize the Clemson offense. They were going to use some tempo. Will Shipley was going to turn into Christian McCaffrey, right? Because that's the obvious comp. Like I had high hopes for this offense. They're not putting up many points, man. They can't score. They really can't score. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't have many words to say. Like I'm kind of there's nothing really left to say. They're just not that good right now.
I know everyone likes to focus on the receivers or their lack thereof the last several years. I think the bigger problem is the offensive line. You look at their rushing numbers the last several weeks. They cannot run the ball. They really can't. Yeah, and that it feels like we have a lot of that going on in college football right now. Just feels like there's a lot of schools that would love to have a few more good offensive linemen. Clemson is one of those. Okay, let's move on a little bit here. Georgia beats Florida 43-20, world's largest outdoor cocktail party. You're the Georgia fan here. Started off good for Florida the first drive when they had the script, and then it seems like Georgia just kind of. I mean, they're bigger and faster and stronger. Is it as simple as that, Ashton?
I think so. Billy Napier is trying to build things in that same vein as Saban did, as Kirby did, really kind of the same, even as Jimbo Fisher a little bit. And it's very physical. Kind of you key a lot of your offense off of the run and physical defense and good tackling. Like that's kind of your whole your team. You're going to tackle well and you're going to try to run the ball, and it kind of works against some teams. However, when you play another team that has more talent than you at those things, you have no chance. Like you have no shot against a team that they're trying to do the same thing that you are. They're just better at it. I think this is why you see teams like Michigan struggle against Georgia, Florida struggle against Georgia. It's going to be really hard when you're trying to run the ball against that front. It really is. Georgia's they're not really going to let you run the ball that much. So Florida, it's not really fair for their fans to get upset about this one. Georgia's not really your measuring stick right now. Like Florida beat Tennessee. Florida got beat by Kentucky. Florida still has to play Missouri. Like those three games are games that you have to worry about more than Georgia. Georgia and Florida aren't on the same playing field. Now, Florida's having a great recruiting class coming in, and they can get back to that. But right now, they don't have the talent to compete up front with Georgia. You said in your intro, they're bigger, faster, stronger. That's kind of all that really mattered. That's kind of all that mattered. On Saturday. It's great for me, though, by the way. Like, I love all of this. This was so much fun. One of the most enjoyable games to watch from a Georgia fan ever. Like, just blowing out Florida is fantastic. I grew up getting beat by Florida, usually in the Spurrier years or even the Ron Zook years, and definitely the Urban Meyer years. Those were not good years for me when I was younger. So it feels great. It feels great. Florida knows they have no shot in this game, and it's wonderful.
By the way, Carson Beck really turning into quite the quarterback. Right now, he's tied for 7th in Heisman odds at plus 2,500, and that's just going to get like higher and higher. I think he's 11.3 yards per attempt in this game, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Georgia's running game is not great, but it almost doesn't matter if they're getting really good quarterback play like that and their defense is figuring it out as well. True or false, Ashton, we see Michigan and Georgia play at some point this year.
I mean, I think we do. I think they're the best 2 teams going right now. They're definitely the 2 teams with the least amount of flaws that we've seen. Yeah, I think Michigan still has another gear that they will get into. I know they're beating up on they haven't really played anyone great yet, but they've been winning. But I still think that Michigan has another gear yet too, with that added passing attack that maybe they didn't have in years past. That they're definitely better at this year. So yeah, no, I agree. I think they're probably the 2 best tackling teams in all of football, and probably 2 of the better pass rushing teams in all of football. And I know Georgia hasn't had a ton of sacks, but I do think that when you see Georgia, Michigan's had a ton of sacks, to credit to them. Georgia has not, like they have had in years past, but as was the case on Saturday against Florida and maybe even the game against Kentucky, Georgia will get after the passer in big games. Like they kind of are saving it, seems a little bit in the sack department. So yeah, I agree. Do you feel that way as well?
I'm leaning more and more that way. It feels like they're the two best teams going, maybe alongside Ohio State, who, by the way, some of you might be listening to this after the first rankings come out, the playoff rankings. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see Ohio State at number one, just because they got the wins against Notre Dame and Penn State and Wisconsin now. Like that's a pretty good trio of wins, regardless of what you think about Wisconsin. It's as far as just the names that they've beaten, it's about as good as anybody has done collectively so far.
Right.
But yeah, those might be. Yeah, I guess in my heart somewhere, like my gut still thinks Michigan is better than Ohio State. And I think if Georgia plays to their potential, they're still probably the best team in the country. So wouldn't be shocked if we see Georgia, Michigan again. All right. The game I was at, Notre Dame beats Pitt 58-7. I don't know if it's worth talking about much, but Pitt, their offense sucks. Can confirm. Christian Veyer, their quarterback, really bad, threw 4 interceptions.
Yeah.
Second game in a row that Xavier Watts, Notre Dame safety, had 2 interceptions. Second game in a row that they forced 5 turnovers. Yeah, it was just kind of a blowout. I mean, it was 17-0 at halftime. And at that point, I turned to my brother and I said, I'm still not super impressed by our offense. And I think that's still true. And then I look at the numbers, and Notre Dame put up 535 yards of offense and 8.2 yards per play, which is good. But I think I'm still leaning towards Notre Dame's offense is fine, but not as good as maybe some of the recent scores have made it look.
That's fair. I think the defense has been very opportunistic, right?
Yes.
And you also got a special teams touchdown in this one too.
2 of them.
As someone who was betting the Pitt side in this, and I think you had the under.
Yeah.
It was hey, we didn't have to sweat it. You can at least say that we did
Right.
not have to sweat it out. It was over early. Couldn't have been more
well
wrong here.
early in the third quarter for me. I felt great
Okay.
about the under at halftime. It was 17-0, and then in the first 10 minutes of the third quarter, it was like 4 touchdowns or something. So
for me, I watched until I saw that punt return, the first punt return, and then
Oof.
Notre Dame went up 7 points. And then I mean, when they had him tackled like 4 different times, and I was like, well, that's the kind of day it's going to be for that game. And there's no need to watch further because I already know how this one's going to turn out. That's what and I literally didn't watch it again. But Audric Estime, can we give him some love? That dude is one of the most underrated running backs in college football. Georgia, he would be Georgia's best running back tomorrow. Like, convinced of it. Georgia has a little bit of depth issues at running back, but I think he'd start for almost any team in the country. I think he's that good.
The last time I saw, I think he had the best odds to win the Doak Walker Award this year. So
nice. Good for him.
By the way, Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame's top corner, missed the game. He's supposed to be back this next week against Clemson. I just bring this out to make a point about Notre Dame's defense this season. He didn't play. Cam Hart, their other starting corner, got hurt in the second quarter. A minor injury, but they just kept him out because obviously they didn't need him. The 2 backup cornerbacks both had an interception. One was a pick 6, and the other one had a one-handed interception. So, yeah, I've been preaching it all since the offseason. This is the first time in my lifetime that Notre Dame's best position group is the cornerbacks, and I'm still trying to get used to it, but it feels kind of good.
Do you know that if y'all hadn't lost to Louisville,
oh my goodness,
you guys would be a playoff contender right now?
Either loss, just change either loss to a win in Notre Dame.
Or if you hang on to that interception that Honda McCord threw you in the Notre Dame game, that was, I mean, so close for Notre Dame.
Notre Dame has to win out, or it will be an unsuccessful season.
Yeah, you should though. You'll be favored.
Even if Notre Dame wins out, it will still. It'll be cool, but it'll still feel like, man, it could have been so much more, especially in a year where there's not a great team out there. So
true.
All right, let's move on.
One thing.
Or go ahead.
Did you hear Pat Narduzzi's comments after the game?
Yes.
Any chance? Did you enjoy that? Like we're okay. We're a Narduzzi critic, right? Kind of.
Yes.
We're a little critical, right?
Yes.
And I mean, he just lobbed his players directly under the bus. Mm-hmm. I mean, directly. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, for those who didn't see, it was something along the lines of, we thought we lost a lot of players last year and we thought we replaced them, but clearly we didn't do a good job of that. So, and there was quite a few players quote tweeting it. And
yes,
it didn't seem like it was going over super well in his locker room.
We'll not be betting on Pitt for the rest of the year. Can confirm.
2 years ago, Pitt won the ACC, and then he was tired of all the scoring they were doing. So Mark Whipple was goodbye, and it's just been completely downhill since then. So
yeah.
All right, Louisville beat Duke 23-0. Riley Leonard actually did play in this game. Very unsuccessful night for him, though, and Duke in general, as they got blanked here. I don't know. There's a whole lot here other than Louisville. They control their own destiny in the ACC. They're 7-1 now. Great season for them so far. Quite a first year for Jeff Brom. Jack Plummer, their quarterback, is just nothing special at all, and they're still figuring it out. Like, I don't have really much to say other than just props to Jeff Brom for the job he's done there in year one.
Yeah, good for him. They only have the one loss, but it was a really bad loss to Pitt.
Yeah,
awful loss. And Pittsburgh is not a very good football team, and Louisville got smoked by Pitt. That's funny.
Yep. Miami beats Virginia. I should say Miami escapes Virginia 29-26. Not a whole lot to talk about there, I suppose, but Miami 6-2 now. What could have been just a horrendous year for Miami after the loss to Georgia Tech. Like they're finding a way to make it not feel quite so bad. So
sure.
Yeah, props to them. Auburn beats Mississippi State 27-13. Again, a game that's not super deep in meaning. Both teams are 4-4 now. I still feel like Mississippi State, they might have to find another head coach this offseason.
Yeah, I think I agree.
It's painful. They're so experienced. They have such a, like, for them, I think they really have a talented roster, and they can't put it together.
Yes.
Minnesota beats Michigan State 27-12. Nebraska beats Purdue 31-14. Texas beats BYU 35-6. Any thoughts on any of those three games before we quickly move on to Oregon, Utah?
No, let's move on.
All right, Oregon goes into Utah and crushes Utah 35-6. Man, Oregon's a wagon. Like, this is really impressive, man.
I watched a ton of this game. It was really, it was just over early. I think that Oregon gets the ball, immediately scores, and you realize, like, Utah, no disrespect to Bryson Barnes, he's a good quarterback, or a good backup quarterback as they go, and he's had some big games for them. But without Cam Rising, Utah was not going to be able to hang with Oregon, and you kind of knew that kind of early on. Bo Nix is one of the most accurate passers and in-control passers in the game, and he actually has a nice little dual threat to him as well, like nice little running attack.
Think about the first part of that sentence. You would not have said that 2 years ago. He's really improved. It's impressive.
He has one of the highest completion percentages in all of college football right now. So yeah, Bucky Irving, fantastic little running back for them too. Yeah, I mean, he's been great, not just rushing, also out of the backfield. But for me, what keeps standing out every time I turn the Oregon game on, Troy Franklin is underrated, man. That dude is exceptional. I think he could. We talk about a lot of good receivers in the Pac-12, especially at Washington, and rightly so. But Troy Franklin is as good as any of them. I think he's. I mean, Marvin Harrison is in a league of his own as far as receiver. But then for me, there's a short list at for the number 2 spot, and I think I'd have Franklin on there. I think he's that good. It was impressive. Oregon, really anyone doesn't go into Rice Eccles and bully Utah. That just doesn't happen, man. And this was a beatdown from the jump. So yeah, I don't know if you got to watch it. You probably didn't get to watch much of it at all.
No.
But yeah, it was dominant. So yeah, props to Oregon. I think they're going to win the Pac-12. I really think that they're the best team out there right now, especially with the way that I know Washington's still undefeated, but they have not looked good the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Oregon has retained the physicality and line play and defense that they had under Cristobal, but they actually also play offense now too. So that's exciting to see for them. They're rolling right along. They just got a commitment from Elijah Rushing, 5-star defensive end too. So the program is doing quite well. USC beats Cal 50-49. Cal went for 2 to win the game late in regulation, which, by the way, respect. No, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. when you're a big underdog like that. It's the same old story. Like, what more is there to say? Cal's offense, USC's offense is good and their defense is trash. And they play Washington this week, so I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
I think this means that we need to give Alex Grinch an extension this offseason.
Yeah.
I think that's what this means.
As a Notre Dame fan, I am completely in favor of that. Yes. Into the evening, Tennessee beats Kentucky 33-27. This game, it felt like every time that Kentucky would make it a one-score game, Tennessee would then score again. Like, it felt like Kentucky could never quite get the ball back with a chance to really take the lead. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading this wrong. I didn't watch the whole thing, but that was my read on it from what I was able to see.
Mm-hmm. One thing that really impressed me from the Tennessee standpoint is how well they ran the ball on Kentucky. Kentucky doesn't really get run on, and Tennessee ran all over them, and it started early. They had a long run for a touchdown for just right there in the first quarter. So Joe Milton was in control. He only had 3 incompletions and no picks. Wow. And that's all you're hoping for as a Tennessee fan. Like, that's all you're hoping for. I think Tennessee played really clean football. They also shut down Kentucky's rushing attack. Ray Davis is a really good back for Kentucky. He really couldn't get going. His longest run was 8 yards on the night. Devin Leary did play well. He hasn't had a good year for Kentucky, the transfer from NC State. He did play really, really excellent. But yeah, it was Tennessee was the better team there. And you replay this game, Tennessee wins the majority of the time. I was impressed with them. They have 2 losses on the year, a bad loss to Florida and a close loss to Alabama. And they've got some winnable games left. They have UConn, Missouri, and then the big one when Georgia goes to their place. Mm-hmm. Tennessee has a chance to still make a big time bowl game. They have a really talented roster. I think Tennessee's a good football team. They really are.
By the way, it seems like almost every week we come on here and we talk about Tennessee's running game. 90% of coaches don't get this, but Josh Heupel gets this. Spread your defense out, spread the other team's defense out, and then run the ball. And it works almost every time. Spread to run, spread to run, spread to run. It's very frustrating as a fan of a team who does not do that. They like to bring in all the tight ends and try to bully everybody. Yeah. Tennessee understands it's easier to block 5 with 5 than to block 8 with 8 because it just takes one guy missing his block to blow up the play. And when only 5 guys have to make a block, you got a lot better chance. So I just wanted to point that out as someone who really is a fan of Josh Heupel's offense. When you don't have Hendon Hooker, you figure out a way to run for 253 yards against Kentucky. Like, that's really impressive. And a huge part of it is very simple. Just spread the defense out and run right at them.
I agree. The wide splits, they had their receivers so far out to the boundaries. And yeah, it makes the leverage for the safeties and the nickelback in run support is awful. Like, they just can't, they struggle so much to come in and make plays.
Absolutely. All right. Washington beats Stanford 42-33.
Yeah.
Washington faltering a little bit down the stretch. They're still undefeated. So that's key, obviously. Stanford is growing as the season goes along. They're only 2-6, but Troy Taylor, the first-year coach there, he's doing some good things, at least with their offense. I feel like Stanford they're not good, but they're at least feisty. And the Stanford fan out there has to be excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Just one. That's not kind. The story for me in this game was Washington. I had Washington to cover. Washington needed to get right. That's what I thought. Yeah. Washington needed a get right game, and their offense kind of was, and then the defense kind of started to falter. So yeah, they have a big game coming up this week, which we'll cover here in a minute. But like, Washington is the undefeated team out there in the Pac-12. They beat Oregon. Remember, and Oregon has looked like world beaters ever since. Washington has done nothing but falter. So this was a close football game. I mean, back and forth contest here. So against Stanford, that's not something that a playoff contender does. It's just really not. So yeah, there's questions about Washington right now.
Okay, Ohio State beats Wisconsin 24-10. Not an exactly overwhelming win here, but pulled away late. Wisconsin's offense just couldn't really get anything going against Ohio State's defense, which By the way, like that Ohio State defense is legit. We keep saying it, but more and more, like it continues to be proven true. Any thoughts on this game more than what I've just said?
It's the opposite of what you would normally think an Ohio State team would be. They play this defense is really, really good for Ohio State.
Yes.
And their offense, the more you see it, the less impressed you are. So yeah, they're more balanced than what they've been in years past. I'll say this. What they were doing with a whole bunch of just airing it out and not playing sound defense and not tackling well wasn't working for them. So, I mean, this defense is legitimately, top 5 defense in college football, statistically at least. And we'll see if that holds up over time. They haven't played any fantastic offenses yet either. So, like if they have all these great stats and still get blitzed by Michigan, then none of this really matters. But for now, that is a much improved defense. Credit to them. They need, we took shots at them right in the offseason. And they have clearly corrected some things. But yeah, the offense now is kind of a concern, which is not something you thought you would ever say at Ohio State.
They have a game against Rutgers this week where the total is 42.5, which tells you something about both sides of the ball for Ohio State.
Correct.
Okay. UCLA beats Colorado 28-16. Georgia Tech upsets North Carolina 46-42.
Yeah.
I don't want to overreact to this because North Carolina at 6-2 feels about right. Like that we know that they started off 6-0 and now it's two games in a row of getting upset, but first by
Correct.
Virginia and then Georgia Tech, which is not exactly great. But if you kind of step back and look at the whole bigger picture, I think 6-2 feels about right for North Carolina.
Losing to Georgia Tech, though.
That's pretty bad.
It's Georgia Tech, man. Come on.
Yeah, you're right. North Carolina, they're basically USC, I think. Their defense has proven down the stretch to not be very good.
We can say, just real quick, Haynes King, the transfer there, that he came from Texas A&M and is transferred to Georgia Tech. That dude's a pretty good quarterback, and he's having a good year. Threw 4 touchdowns on Saturday to beat North Carolina. Good for him. For him. He's having a good year. Speaking
of a good year, at least compared to what we thought was going to happen, Oklahoma State beats Cincinnati 45-13.
Right.
This was a school that was left for dead, and now they got Bedlam coming up, the last Bedlam ever. And yeah, they got a chance here to do something special. They can still win the Big 12.
Okay, and the reason we left them for dead is because they got beat by South Alabama at home 33-7. Like, yeah, we left them for dead. And because you got hammered by South Alabama, not just Alabama, that's why we did it. But credit to you, that offense has turned around. Like, they are scoring points on everyone right now. So, 29, 39, 48, and 45 that's all, by the way, all in Big 12 play. They're putting up points against conference opponents. Good for them. Yeah, they could easily go to the Big 12 championship game if they beat Oklahoma. And yeah, considering that they got hammered out of conference by South Alabama, that's just really funny.
It shows a little bit what happens when you choose the right quarterback. That's not everything in their turnaround, but that is a big part of it. So
correct.
Arizona State beats Washington State 38-27. And Arizona beats Oregon State 27-24. Kind of group these two together. The Pac-2 schools who we said all year we're rooting for, Oregon State and Washington State, they lose to the Arizona schools.
That's tough.
It's a little bit tough. Oregon State's still 6-2. It's not a bad season by any stretch, but
no,
we won't see them back anywhere close to the top 10 again this year, sadly enough. So.
No.